Welcome to the Wealth Stream Podcast. The team at Hightower Great Lakes share their insights and passions for empowering their clients to live their best life. In this energetic podcast, we will take you on a journey to help you navigate your financial future, overcome life's challenges to reach your financial goals, and find the financial clarity you've been searching for. Let's explore the downstream impact of your wealth and what it means to you, your family, and your community to live greater.
Hello and welcome to the Wealth Stream with Tim Scannell from Hightower Great Lakes. Tim, how are you?
I'm doing great today. How about yourself, Eric?
I am great as well. It is a wonderful day, and it's a wonderful day to be talking with you. I know I'm going to learn something today.
Yeah, you're going to learn all about Switzerland, maybe, or something like that. Yeah.
Okay, that's a new one. Learning about Switzerland. What do I need to know about? Are we talking vacation? Are we talking what's up with Switzerland?
Well, as you know, and we're probably on podcast number 80, pretty close to it, but I talk a lot about our, I think what is a wealth management formula, fiduciary, process we follow. And as part of the advanced planning that we do, we focus a lot on wealth enhancement. And the last few podcasts I focused as it relates to wealth enhancement on, exiting your business, really speaking to business owners about how they should plan for it. And this is what I would call part of my It's Not About the Numbers series. I actually just made that up this morning. So,
all right.
Sorry I didn't warn you.
I like it. It's not about the numbers series.
It's not about the numbers because, the last podcast we recorded, we talked about, valuing your business is not rocket science. And, because I think so many business owners focus on revenue and profits and et cetera. But we talked last time in that podcast about really there's, the owner's reasons for exiting, for example, are really important in terms of determining the value. Are you leaving because you just want to follow a passion? Is there a crisis going on? Also, how prepared they are, and then also, how much they've planned with their employees. So all those three number things really impact the value. And so today I thought I would also talk about maybe one other item that impacts the value of a business when you're looking to exit. It affects your ability to, enhance your wealth, I would say. And that's called the Switzerland discount. And you want to avoid that, Eric.
Avoiding the Switzerland discount. Now, okay, I need the definition. What is the Switzerland discount?
Okay. So, first of all, I'll just tell you, I find that most business owners, including myself, I was guilty of that for many years. It's a big problem. And here's what it is. So, I don't know to what extent you probably don't, but study the Swiss, but they're known as being very, very independent.
Okay.
I think around the world, especially during COVID, people have always considered people in the United States very independent and as cowboys, but historically the Swiss are even known to be more independent. And, just as an example, even when the euro was created, the European Union and the euro currency, they're sandwiched right between France and Germany, yet they elected not to participate in the euro. They wanted to remain independent. And then going back, and I don't know if you're not a fan of World War II, but if you follow or read and watch movies about the World Wars I and II, they never actually sided with any side. They always wanted to, even though they're right there in the middle of the whole thing, they somehow were able to stay independent and out of the fray, I guess. I don't know if they stayed out of the fray, but they didn't side with one side or the other.
Yeah, that's kind of the reference that I always remember was, I'm Switzerland. I'm neutral. I'm in the middle, but I'm not taking sides. And so I could definitely see that as part of independence for sure.
Yeah, and, imagine the balancing act of doing that during those wars. And it's not the same, but, we just finished the holidays, and there was certainly times when all my family was over where you have to be Switzerland,
Yes.
You have to be impartial, and you want we want this holiday to go well,
That's
so
right.
let's not talk about certain topics, right? Politics, religion, all that stuff.
Yep. That's probably a good idea.
So that's what it is, and really what I talk to business owners about is, when they're setting up the business, when they're structuring the business, there's really three things you don't want to be over-reliant on. And one is you want to be free of being too reliant on one or two key customers. You want to be free of reliance on maybe one or two of your key employees. Sometimes that's yourself as a business owner. And you also want to be free of reliance on, key suppliers, so that if there's a disruption, as we've seen in the last year, your finances are not totally impacted.
Yeah, I know that, and I'm sure there's more than one supplier out there, but computer chips, right, it has been a big issue this last year and a half. Vehicle manufacturing, all sorts of manufacturing. There was such a high demand for computer chips, and there was such a low supply that really impacted a lot of businesses across the board. And I think the ones that did better were ones that were able to get a little bit of supplies from multiple suppliers. They were still able to keep up some of their inventory, where, like you said, if there was somebody who was really relying on one supplier and they got hit hard, there's nothing you can do at that point. You're scrambling.
Yeah, and I have a great friend and client who owns a Mazda dealership, and his parking lot's virtually empty because he can't get new cars. Now, fortunately, he's selling used cars, but and you drive by many car dealers, Ford, BMW, doesn't matter. They're all impacted by, like you said, by the chips.
Yep, absolutely.
And in my business, we always talk about, every business talks about concentration risk, but for example, in my business, we always look at the valuation of a financial planning practice, of a wealth management firm. We talk about concentration. You don't want to have too many clients representing, 1, 2, 5% even of your business, because if they leave, it impacts, your ability to serve. But also, we look at things like age. What's the average age of our client base? And that's one of the reasons why we focus so much on supporting multi-generational, their kids and grandkids, because we want to be a planning firm for the family. And, because as people pass on, or if they retire, they move, you don't want them to start looking for other advisors. Mm-hmm. But the other thing, too, is like even when you look at COVID, with key customers, I have clients who are in the construction industry, and one in particular serves primarily the steel industry. And for a while there, the steel industry was really significantly impacted, and the revenues were impacted, and they had to make tough choices about retaining and keeping. Or I have a trucking company client that does a lot of shipping, a lot of concerts. Basically a concert moves from Chicago to LA. They are the truck driving firm that ships it all out there. So they were definitely impacted too. Mm-hmm. And then I have also just an odd one. I have a client who's an attorney, and I was thinking about him today, that in Chicago, it's different in every state, different in every region, but in Chicago, if you purchase or sell a home, you're required to have an attorney on both the buyer and the seller side. In fact, when I moved out of Chicago, I didn't realize that the rest of the world doesn't do that, but this attorney does about almost 800, 900 closings a year. And back in 2008, when we had the meltdown, when the housing market crashed, I asked him, I said, well, what are you doing now? And he said, unfortunately, I'm working on foreclosures. So, we kind of switched over to the other side. But the point is, he was completely reliant on, key customers or key sectors that really impacted him when things went bad.
Yeah, and luckily he was able to pivot a little bit. I mean, it same industry, same kind of genre, but he had to switch to the foreclosure side, and at least he still had some business.
Exactly. And so the key point number one is, be like Switzerland. Don't rely on just a few customers, a few industries. Try to diversify, because if you do that, a potential buyer, first of all, you're going to be impacted when things happen like COVID, but also as a buyer looks at your business, they're going to discount that, and they're going to maybe pay you less just because of that concentration and the reliance on, a couple of key customers.
Yeah.
And then the second one is key employees. And I'll just talk about, first of all, when I typically see this, it's oftentimes the owner itself. And this is what I mentioned earlier. I certainly was guilty of this for a long time. When you start a business, you're growing a business, and clients, want things, you just give them what they want, and you end up doing a lot of that yourself. And so you create this habit of doing that. And, and all of a sudden you're looking to retire, you're looking to exit, but customers are continually coming to you when things go wrong, or, when you go on vacation, revenue slows down, or you're finding that maybe your revenue, your business is not growing anymore because it's relying on you too much. And we call that the owner's trap. When you have a business that relies too much on the owner as the key employee, it's going to be harder to sell, and you're not going to get as much when you do sell. And also, you're more at risk because if you are sick, you want to take time off. It becomes very difficult.
And I could see that also, Tim, with, like you said before, key employees. I mean, the owner can fall into the owner trap, but when you have a great employee that you're relying on and you're compensating well and everything's really good, and that key employee does a ton of the work, that's great. However, the flip side of that coin is what happens if that key employee leaves, or if when you're ready to sell a business, a key employee is like, I don't know if I want to stick around for a new owner.
No, completely. And, I had an example of this about a year and a half ago with a manufacturing client where the owner was exiting, and they really relied on the chief operating officer, the technology person. He was really, was in there setting up the manufacturing processes. And what they found with the accountant actually identified that, they were going on a path where they were expanding so much, they were investing so much in new equipment that they were actually going on a path towards possibly being insolvent, or, they didn't, and they're doing fine. But they ended up having to replace this person because the other thing that they found was that he was specifically trying to ensure job security, let's say, and make it so that he was the only one who really knew how it all worked. And that's just a drastic example. But I have seen that, in the 30 years I've been doing this, I've seen that a dozen times where you just need checks and balances. And when you rely on one person, it just becomes really hard to do that. You need to have people take vacations, and you need to cross-train and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That happens oftentimes with chief financial officers, controllers, where, there's only one person who knows how to pay bills or process payroll. I've also seen it with sales reps, where you have a large percentage of your revenue being generated or new business being generated by maybe one or two people, and they decide to leave, and all of a sudden there goes a big chunk of your revenue. So the other thing you need to be like Switzerland for is don't rely, on just a few key employees. You really need to think about it and make sure you're planning for that kind of risk.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And then the third one and final one is really what I call your key suppliers. And this is one that I think a lot of business owners don't think about as much. I mean, they might think about concentration risk for customers, and they might plan really well to make sure that, all their employees, their team is working together, collaborating, everybody knows what's going on. But I have seen examples where you've got these key suppliers, and, when a buyer comes in to look at your business, they want to invest in a business that's basically not in danger of being, a supplier risk. We just talked about it, with the chips. That's a great example. And I mentioned, the client that is a car dealer. I had a different car dealer client during 2008 when the market turned, and all of a sudden it appeared like GM was going to go bankrupt. And the government came in and they kind of bailed them out. But as a result, or one of the things that came out of that is they decided to limit the number of dealerships, for each of the brands that they're offering. And eventually they eliminated some brands. And this business owner, this car dealer, had a brand that was Buick that was basically taken away and eventually eliminated. And all of a sudden your business is gone. So, in that case, that's why sometimes you might see when you're driving down the road, you see car dealers that have multiple brands. I think oftentimes that's typically why they do that, to diversify that risk.
Yeah, I've seen that, and I actually wondered that quite a few years ago. I was like, man, that's, there's a certain name brand, but then it's such and such Dodge, such and such Ford, such and such Chevy. I'm like, man, this is a huge operation, and that's exactly it. You just don't know, and I liked a Buick here and there back in the day, but yeah. I know I haven't seen any lately. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I have a client that has restaurants, and they specifically diversify the brands that they are franchising for or the brands that they're creating, just so that, and also geographically, so that they're not stuck in one area. Where if something goes bad in one, like Indianapolis in particular was hard hit by COVID because they're very much a sports town. Sports in the sense that they have a lot of college, high school, amateur things going on. And when that all stopped, the big convention town too, when that all stopped, all the restaurants and hotels got really hard hit.
Yeah, I can imagine. It would have been a huge hit. I mean, just people not going out, period. And there's only so much you can deliver to somebody's door.
Exactly. And so the key thing is not to rely too much on, a key supplier. I actually was listening to a podcast on the way in and went to the office today, and they were just talking about a company that had, sometimes you sign up for something and you get these giveaways, right? They send you these free gifts, these things. Well, oftentimes they're purchased outside the U.S. where they're manufactured. And, when COVID hit and all of a sudden, the supply chain factors came in or impacted businesses, 100% of their giveaways were no longer available to give away. And that was a really big part of their marketing, really big part of attracting, new customers. So they just had to immediately figure out how to replace that because they were relying, they realized, just on one key supplier, and it just got, it was too risky, I guess.
Yeah.
So what we talk to clients about is, if you're too dependent on one supplier, we have a process that we follow where we kind of look at that for them, and we have strategies. And one of the, a couple of the strategies are, step back and try to invest in customer relationships. For example, if your customer thinks of themselves as buying from you, like for example, this car dealer, his name is on the dealership. So was Buick, my other client who is Mazda, but really to a great extent, his name is what's out there in the community. He's the one sponsoring events, sponsoring the Boys and Girls Club, the local community, things like that. So he's investing in customer relationships so that he was able to pivot to another brand, when Buick was gone. And that really allowed them because they always knew that his family name, he was the one that they were really connected with. Now, obviously, some people are disappointed that there's no Buicks, but he was able to survive and actually do much better long term because he was able to invest in the relationships, in his community with the customers who buy cars from him.
Yeah.
And then the other one too is, we just talked about it with car dealers. Consider investing in and cultivating relationships with alternative suppliers. Even if it is less expensive now, it'll be much better for you in the long run. And then really, always continually look at your suppliers and make sure that you have a diverse number of them so that you can maybe protect yourself from this risk.
Yeah, and I think about this specifically with auto parts stores, right? I think back in the day, it used to be there was certain key manufacturers for parts, and that's what they carried. But I go into, AutoZone, the last couple of weeks, and if you want brake pads, there's a variety, right? There's probably 7-8 different brands that are in there, different levels, different types. And I don't think that's just because they want to offer different brands. I think that truly is to, hedge their bets, if you will, because one manufacturer may slow down or go out of business, and it's not like you can't provide brake parts.
Exactly.
Right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
interesting.
Again, I'm a fan of podcasts, but I listened to one on the way in this morning by the CEO of Airbnb, and he was really talking about how during COVID, I also have clients who own hotels, and how the hotel owners that have the brick and mortar were so impacted. And he just the Airbnb CEO talked a little bit about how they just very much on a dime quickly reevaluated, their business model and restructure their company. And they had to, literally let almost 30% of their employees go, which was, really hard to do. But, if you just have to always think of, I don't want to be reliant on, my suppliers, my employees, my customers, et cetera. You want to have a plan in case something like this happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what I'd leave the business owner with, or the listener with, is, we have a process that can help you identify how much the Switzerland discount will impact you. We can actually quantify that. And we also have strategies that we've used with many, many business owners to increase the value, in anticipation of selling at some point in the future. So I just think that if any of the listeners are interested, we have a lot of resources that we can help them with.
All right. How do they get a hold of this?
So you can always call me, 219-531-4941, or send me an email at tscannell@hightoweradvisors.com, and we can just schedule a free, build your exit meeting. We can also call it the Avoid the Switzerland Discount Meeting.
Either way, yeah, that sounds pretty good.
Exactly.
And is that a free thing that you're offering?
That's free, yes. It's basically any give me a call and I can help you over the phone. We can schedule a meeting, Zoom, in person, whatever. But yeah, that first meeting, even the second meeting typically is always free.
That's awesome. Yeah. And for those that are listening that have not heard podcasts before, please go back and listen to Tim's other podcasts. I mean, like you said, I think we're on number 80 or 80, above 80. You'll find out that Tim is very generous with his time for all sorts of issues, for all sorts of topics, the things that he's spoken on previous podcasts. So, Tim, always a pleasure. Thank you so much. Any closing thoughts for today?
No, just that I do this for a living. We do it all the time. It's very hard for somebody to get really good at exiting your business because they typically do it once and you only get one shot at it. So we have a ton of resources, ton of experience, and a lot of great certified advisors. So just reach out and give us a call.
Fantastic. Tim, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And of course, our last thank you goes to you, listener. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to the Wealth Stream Podcast with Tim Scannell. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Tim comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. This makes it much easier to share these podcasts with your friends and family. Again, thank you so much for listening today. For everyone at Hightower Great Lakes, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Wealth Stream Podcast. We hope you gained some valuable insight that you can apply to your life and share with others. Please don't forget to subscribe below to be notified when new episodes become available. And don't forget to live greater. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Hightower Great Lakes. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning. Hightower Great Lakes is a group of investment professionals registered with Hightower Securities LLC, member FINRA and SIPC, and with Hightower Advisors LLC, a registered investment advisor with the SEC. Securities are offered through Hightower Securities LLC. Advisory services are offered through Hightower Advisors LLC.